Conscious living. Now, here is a term that is constantly used in spiritual circles, in therapy, in, coaching, the self-help culture, but very few people actually stop to ask what it actually means. Hashtag conscious living. What, what do we mean by conscious living? Does it mean we have to become more conscious? Do we have to raise our consciousness? And, we speak about consciousness as though everyone understands what is meant by consciousness. Like, is it a dial that you can turn up? Is it a muscle you can strengthen? Is it a destination that you can arrive at once you've done all this inner work? So today I'm going to offer you a little something different. It is going to be practical. It's going to be something that you can work with. And we are going to start with William James, who was a psychologist and philosopher. We're going to touch on Krishnamurti's take on consciousness as well. Krishnamurti was a spiritual teacher of the 20th century. We are going to also primarily going to focus on psychosynthesis, which is Roberto Assiglioli's therapeutic model. Maybe a little bit of Jung here and there. So stick around if you want to understand consciousness and how to improve your life. Okay, right. So let's begin. So William James was arguably the first person to study consciousness scientifically. He was the first to describe consciousness not as a thing, but as a stream. Now, by first, I mean in the Western world, he was the first to actually describe consciousness by using that word consciousness, right? In the East, right? The Tao, all of that, they were describing consciousness way before that, but let's not go into that right now. Let's just stick with how, in the West, right, William James described consciousness as a stream of consciousness, always moving, always selecting, always shaped by where attention happens to fall. So where your attention happens to fall is where you are conscious, okay? And Jiddu Krishnamurti was, again, the spiritual teacher of the 20th century who spent his entire life pointing out that the moment you try to actually improve your consciousness, the moment you actually try to become more aware, more present, more evolved, you have already introduced a division that is itself the source of the problem. Right, so in 1890, William James wrote a book called The Principles of Psychology, and in the middle of it, he offered a description of consciousness that is still so accurate that we haven't really improved on it since. He called it the stream of consciousness. And what he made clear was that consciousness is not a fixed state. It's a stream, always moving, always flowing. You cannot step outside it and look at it the way you look at an object on a table. You can't separate yourself from it because you are always inside it. You are the stream. Now, this is the first thing that I want you to do to understand what James was saying. James observed that our consciousness is radically selective. Right now, for example, as you watch this, as you're listening to my words, there are sensations in your body that you weren't aware of until I actually mention them. So I'm going to mention them now. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your body wherever you are sitting, on the chair, on the couch, wherever you are sitting, however, wherever you are now, feel the weight of your body as you watch this, as you listen to me. Notice the temperature of the air on your face. Now, those sensations were there the whole time. Your consciousness was simply not selecting them, it was selecting the words that I was saying, the thoughts those words were triggering, whatever is present, and whatever is present in like your peripheral vision or awareness. So now, this isn't a malfunction. This is how consciousness works. It is always curating your experience, always foregrounding something. So it's bringing stuff to the fore, to the front, and then it's also sending things to the background. And now this is why it matters practically. What your consciousness selects, what it foregrounds, and what it sends to the background is not random. It is shaped by your history, by your conditioning, by your fears, your desires, your unresolved emotional material. Okay, so let me give you an example. Say you were a person who grew up in an unpredictable household, like myself, right? You will have a consciousness that is exquisitely turned to threat. And it will select, right? So your consciousness will select for signs of danger in any room. You are exquisitely tuned to that, exquisitely tuned to the tone of voice, exquisitely tuned to facial expression long before anything dangerous has actually happened. Okay, the person who learned early that their emotions were unwelcome will have a consciousness that roots feeling away from awareness, not through choice, but through all these small habitual selections over years and decades, thousands of habitual selections until the stream simply doesn't flow through those channels anymore. In other words, the emotions are put in the background, right? They are pushed away. This is, by the way, what Carl Jung meant by the shadow. It's not, the shadow isn't a darkness or an evil, but it's the part of experience that your consciousness stopped selecting, and they were rooted underground, but they still continue to shape the surface of our lives without being seen. So hopefully I made that a little bit clearer to you on how consciousness actually works in a very radically selective way. Okay, now I want you to do something right now, and I want you to return to it throughout this week. For the next 60 seconds, and I mean this literally, I want you to try it now. I want you to simply notice what your consciousness is selecting. I don't want you to change it. I don't want you to judge it. I just want you to see it. So I'm going to go silent here. What is foregrounded right now? Is it just a thought? Is it a feeling? Is it a physical sensation? Or is there something that you're trying to work out or something that you're worried about? Now, William James also spoke about the fringe of consciousness. Now, the fringe of consciousness are the half-formed thoughts, the felt senses, and the inklings that surround the clearer content. It's the thing that is almost a feeling and the thought that hasn't quite arrived yet. So just gently see, if there is something in the fringe as well right now for you. Is there a thought that is arriving but not quite fully formed, right? That's a fringe. That's something that belongs in the fringe of consciousness. So this is the beginning of living more consciously. It's like not a dramatic moment of insight. It's this very simple, honest looking at what actually is here. Okay. Now let's speak about Krishnamurti. So Krishnamurti said that the observer is the observed. He's not the only spiritual teacher, by the way, who teaches this. Many great teachers have taught us. But let's work with Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti said that the observer is the observed. What did he mean by this? He means that the self that watches your anger is it actually separate from the anger, or is it made of the same material? So the same conditioning, the same history, the same desires and fears as everything else in your stream of consciousness. So when you sit in therapy and you say, I notice that I have this pattern, the fact that you are noticing that pattern is real. It is genuinely valuable. And Krishnamurti would ask, who is the one noticing this pattern? Is that the witness as transparent? Is that witness as transparent and as neutral as you assume? Or is the witness also shaped by how you want to see yourself, by the story you're constructing around yourself, around your growth? Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, describes something that points at the same territory but from a different direction. He said that between the stimulus and the response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom, and in that freedom lies our growth. Again, Viktor Frankl's not the only one who pointed this out. But then that gap, when you give yourself that tiny, precious gap between what happens and then what you actually do about it, is not something that we create through effort. It is something that we notice. And that it was always there. So choiceless awareness is what allows us to find it, not because we have become more evolved, but because we have stopped filling every moment with the noise of trying to be better. Here's an exercise, finding the gap. Now, this is a practice for daily life and not for your meditation cushion, right? So choose one recurring situation in your life where you tend to react automatically. It doesn't have to be a dramatic one. It might be the moment your phone, buzzes with a certain kind of message, or the moment a particular person says something, some particular thing, or the moment you feel overlooked or criticized or judged or rushed. This week, your task in that moment, so in that moment, before you respond, even half a second before, I want you to ask yourself one question. What is actually happening in me right now? Not what should I do? Because that is the automatic response. Not what does this mean? Or how must I handle this? I just want you to say, what is actually happening right now inside me? And you may not have the answer. That's fine. The question itself is the practice, because the question requires you to turn toward your own experience rather than away from it. And that turning is this precious gap, right? That turning is consciousness becoming slightly more choiceful, one moment at a time. And I want you to do this once a day for a week, just once, with just one situation per day, and notice what you find. All right. Now, another thing I want you to do, what blocks consciousness? I want you to become aware of what is blocking consciousness. We've established that consciousness is a stream, right? William James tells us that consciousness is a stream, and that honest observation of the stream includes observing the observer. Now, I want to be very direct about what actually narrows the stream. What pulls our awareness underground, because this is where the practical work lives, right? There are three movements. And if you've been in therapy, this has probably brought you into contact with all this. The first is identification. Identification is what happens when you become absorbed by a feeling, a thought, a role, or a story, that the stream collapses from its full width into a single note. Okay, so when you are truly identified, for example, with your anxiety, everything begins to confirm itself as a threat. When you're fully identified with your grief, with your sorrow, everything begins to feel like loss. When you're fully identified with a narrative about who you are, For example, I'm someone who always gets abandoned. I'm someone who can never get it right. I'm someone who is fundamentally just too much for everyone else. Then that stream flows only through that channel, and everything that doesn't fit is left outside consciousness. And Roberto Assiglioli developed a practice specifically for this called disidentification, not the same as dissociation. Disidentification. And it is one of the most practical, most powerful, useful things I know. And it goes like this. So, I have a body. I want you to say this to yourself every day. I have a body, but I am not my body. My body may be tired. My body may be unwell right now, but that is not what I am. I have emotions, but I am not my emotions. My emotions may be stormy, painful, even joyful, but that is not what I am. I have thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. My thoughts may be clear or confused, creative or even anxious, but I am not my thoughts. What I am is the awareness in which all of this arises. Okay, again, I just want to remind you that this is not a dissociation technique. You're not trying to float above your experience or not feel it. You're creating that beautiful, precious millimeter of space, just enough to allow the feeling, the thought, the story to be present without being the only thing that is present. Okay, so William James would recognize what I've just said here as a widening of the stream of consciousness. Krishnamurti would recognize this as a small movement toward choiceless awareness, not being identified, all right, with anything, which allows something quieter to be noticed. Okay, so that exercise, it's called disidentification, is extremely powerful. When you find yourself in a strong state of identification, consumed by a feeling, consumed by a thought, a story that you've weaved around yourself, which is a spell, people. It's a spell that you weave around yourself. Sit quietly for a moment, place both feet on the floor, take one slow breath, and then either aloud or silently, but preferably aloud, complete the following. I am feeling, state what you're feeling, but I am not this feeling. I am thinking, and then state whatever you're thinking, but I'm not only this thought. I am experiencing, and then state what you're experiencing, but I'm not only this experience. Okay, and then something else that blocks consciousness is conditioning. You know, William James, for example, was deeply concerned with habits, um, how the stream carves channels over time and eventually flows only through those channels without choosing to, without even noticing that it's doing so. So conditioning is not pathology, it's the nervous system that learns from experience that becomes efficient through repetition is doing exactly what it is designed to do. So the problem is not that we are conditioned. The problem is when conditioning runs invisibly. And so the stream flows through yesterday's channels, regardless of whether today calls for something different. So Jung's shadow work at its core is the mapping of unconscious conditioning, finding the places where the stream was diverted underground. You know, remember, go back to the beginning where I said to you that the consciousness either puts things to the foreground or it it moves things to the background, and the shadow is background stuff. So finding the places where your stream of consciousness was diverted underground, where certain feelings and certain impulses, certain aspects of experience became too unwelcome, too unthreatening, and were rooted away from consciousness, from your awareness, to continue flowing underground, shaping the surface of your life without being seen. So, what we call triggers, these are underground rivers. The reaction is larger than the situation because it is carrying more than the situation. It is always carrying everything that flowed into that channel that was never integrated. Okay, and I'm going into deeper stuff here. You don't have to excavate, by the way, your entire history. They want you to believe this, that you have to excavate your entire history. You don't have to excavate your entire history. You don't even have to go thousands of years back into your previous lifetimes, right? But you do have to be willing to be surprised by yourself, to notice when a response is larger than the moment calls for. Like, where are you exaggerating your response? You should be curious about that. You should investigate that. Like when your response to something is like extreme, don't get ashamed by your response. Get curious about it, because when your response is extreme, and extreme does not necessarily mean too loud, too much, too visible, too open. Sometimes extreme looks like too little. It looks like pulling away, hiding. You need to get curious about what might be flowing underneath. Okay, so in closing, what does living consciously actually look like? Living more consciously does not look the way that culture tends to imagine it. It doesn't look like serenity. It doesn't look like having resolved your issues. It doesn't look like being unaffected by difficulties or challenges. And it's certainly not about knowing what to do, in every situation, always knowing the right thing. It's even not having the right meditation practice, that never wavers, or feeling connected to something larger most of the time. Okay. Here is what it actually looks like. And I suspect you will recognize some of this from your own life. Living consciously, really, to me, and I've been doing this work for a long time now, living consciously looks like a longer pause. It's not always a perfect pause, and it doesn't happen in every situation. More often than before, though, there is this moment between what happens and what you do about it. That to me is consciousness at work. It's not dramatic, but it is real. And it looks more like holding your own experience and remaining curious about someone else's experience simultaneously. Like, you can be genuinely affected by something without being entirely consumed by it, because curiosity makes the stream that William James speaks about, the stream of consciousness, it widens the stream of consciousness. There is more room in your awareness for complexity, for contradiction, for paradox. The universe is paradox. Conscious living looks like being surprised by yourself. It's a paradox. The more conscious you become, the more you discover you don't entirely know yourself. And, spiritual teachers will tell you this, by the way. You don't actually know yourself because of all this time spent identifying with 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 what is visible, with so-called reality. We spend so much time identifying and crowding ourselves with labels. So yes, it looks like being surprised by yourself. The stream keeps moving, but new tributaries appear, right? Like new tributaries appear, and you find that you are more than just that. You are richer, possibly stranger. And it's like this quiet, genuine pleasure of a that you start experiencing when you start living more consciously, because the anxious mind stops wanting explanations and answers for all things. The more conscious you are, the more your mind can rest in a question. It doesn't need answers. The more you can hold uncertainty without urgency. You can say, I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't know what's around the corner. And you can actually mean it and not feel like it's a failure. Okay, so I know that this was quite intense, possibly. I hope that you found this helpful. And if you did learn something here today, do leave a comment and do remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends, those friends who are interested in living more consciously and becoming more self-aware. And also, as you know, I am an astrologer and a life coach. I will leave links to my coaching and my astrology readings in the description box. And thank you for being here.